My name is Sandra. I'm 34 years old, and this is the story of how I lost my husband, nearly lost my home, and then discovered that the very people I trusted most were plotting to erase me from my own life. What happened after his funeral shattered the illusion of family forever, and taught me just how far betrayal can reach. 3 months ago, I buried Adam, my husband of 11 years. We had met in our early 20s, built a life together, and shared dreams that were both grand and ordinary. Adam wasn't just my husband, he was my partner in everything. Losing him was like having the ground ripped out from under me. One minute he was walking out the door for work, complaining of a headache, and the next he was gone, a sudden aneurysm, the doctor said. Nothing could be done. At 36, he should have had decades left. Instead, I found myself standing at his funeral, staring at his casket, unable to process how quickly life had unraveled. Grief is a strange thing. It wraps around you, suffocates you, makes every breath feel like an act of defiance. I moved through the days after his death like a shadow, silent, hollow, mechanical. The house we bought together in Beacon Hill felt enormous and empty. Our Victorian home, once filled with laughter, smelled only of dust and silence. I couldn't bear to sleep in our bed some nights, so I found myself on the couch, staring at the ceiling until dawn. When my sister Cassandra called, inviting me to her son's first birthday party, I nearly said no. It was just 1 week after Adam's funeral. Too soon for cake and balloons, too soon to force a smile. But my mother insisted. Family comes first, she reminded me in her gentle yet persistent way. Adam would want you there. Against every instinct I went. I wrapped a gift, brushed concealer over the dark circles under my eyes, and drove across town with tears stinging behind my lashes. What I didn't know was that Cassandra had been preparing for this moment. While I was trying to crawl through grief, she was planning a spectacle that would rip the floor out from beneath me all over again. Her small rental house was crowded with cars. I parked at the end of the line, clutching the wrapped gift as if it were a shield. Inside, blue balloons floated from every corner, and a banner stretched across the wall. Happy first birthday, Lucas. Guests milled around with plastic cups of punch, voices hushed as I walked through the hallway. Their eyes followed me. Some with pity, some with curiosity, all with something I couldn't name. My parents sat stiffly at a picnic table in the backyard, looking like they wanted to be anywhere else. My father's shoulders sagged in relief when he spotted me. Sandra, he said, embracing me. I wasn't sure you'd come. Of course I came, I whispered. Where's the birthday boy? With Cassandra, my mother muttered, avoiding my eyes. Something in her tone unsettled me, but I pushed it aside. Half an hour later, Cassandra emerged with Lucas perched on her hip. She looked radiant, her hair freshly highlighted, a new dress hugging her figure. Her son looked precious in a tiny bow tie and button-up shirt, clapping his little hands at the noise of the crowd. For a brief second I softened. Whatever else happened between Cassandra and me, our lifelong rivalry, her endless need to compete, Lucas was innocent. I wanted to love him, to be the aunt he deserved. But Cassandra had other plans. She tapped her cup with a spoon, commanding everyone's attention. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice carrying across the yard. This past year has been full of surprises. And there's something I can't keep hidden anymore. Not after everything that's happened. A chill crept down my spine. The air seemed to still, conversations silencing, eyes darting. Lucas, she said, stroking her son's hair, is not Tyler's son. Gasps rippled across the backyard. My father stiffened beside me, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Lucas is Adam's, Cassandra announced, her gaze locking with mine. My brother-in-law. My sister's husband. We had a brief affair 2 years ago. It was a mistake, but it happened. And Adam knew the truth. The ground tilted beneath me. My husband? With my sister? My nephew know her son, his child? But she wasn't finished. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document, holding it high like some kind of prize. Adam updated his will before he died, she said with confidence. He wanted his son provided for. This will states that half of the house Sandra and Adam shared should go to Lucas. Silence crashed over the yard. Every pair of eyes turned to me. Pitying, shocked, curious. My parents looked stricken. I felt frozen, numb. Then something unexpected bubbled inside me. Laughter. Not joy, not amusement, but the kind of incredulous laughter that comes when a lie is so audacious it borders on absurdity. I pressed my lips together, fighting it back. My sister had just accused my late husband of infidelity and claimed her son was his child, all to stake a claim on my house. And yet, she didn't know the one truth that made her entire story impossible. Because Adam couldn't have fathered anyone's child. Not after the surgery. Not after the vasectomy. Not after everything we'd endured together. I stood, my voice calm and even. "May I see that will, Cassandra?" She faltered, clearly not expecting composure. Slowly, she handed me the paper. I scanned it quickly. The language was wrong, the signature sloppy, the flourishes exaggerated. A forgery. I folded it neatly and handed it back. "Thank you for sharing," I said. "But this is Lucas's day. We'll talk later." I gathered my purse, kissed my parents' cheeks, and walked out of that backyard as whispers chased me. Once inside my car, hidden from their eyes, the laughter I had held in finally spilled out, sharp, bitter, and trembling. Tears blurred my vision as I let it all out. Grief for Adam, rage at Cassandra, disbelief at her audacity. Because she didn't know. She couldn't possibly know. Adam had prepared for this. And I held the proof that would destroy her lie. I woke the next morning with that paper ghosting behind my eyelids, the jagged loops of a signature pretending to be Adam's, the smug tilt of Cassandra's chin as she waved it like a flag. I made coffee and didn't drink it. I showered and didn't feel clean. When the bank opened, I was already parked out front with my fingers tight around the steering wheel. The way you hold on during turbulence. As if grip alone keeps the plane in the air. They knew me there. Adam and I had been steady faces for years. Deposits from my design clients, transfers from his firm, the occasional chat with the branch manager about the best place to source antique brass hardware. Today, condolences softened every voice. "We're so sorry about Adam," the manager said as he walked me to the private room. A small gray space with a table that felt both funeral parlor and dentist's office. Too clean for grief, too quiet for the noise in my head. He set the sealed box down and left me alone. For a moment I just stared at it, knuckles whitening around the key. It felt obscene to be excited in the middle of loss. But that's what it was. A sparking relief, a sharp-edged hope. I turned the key. The lid gave with a sigh. Inside, Adam's orderliness greeted me. Folders labeled in his neat block print. Will, executed, medical, correspondence, Wilson, personal log. Beneath them, a single sealed envelope with my name written like he used to write notes for me on the fridge. For Sandra. I didn't open the letter first. I couldn't. If I started with the tender thing, I'd dissolve. Instead, I slid out the folder marked will, executed. Heavy paper. Raised seal. Witness signatures I recognized from holiday parties. Margaret Chan, partner. Paul Grady, partner. James Wilson's embossed stamp. Dated 18 months ago. Everything to me explicitly, with a trust for charitable gifts we talked about funding someday when we felt ready. Someday had come without my consent. The medical folder was clinical and cruel in its own way. Appointment notes. A diagnosis, varicocele. The procedure. And then the addendum we had chosen after sitting on our back steps in the half-light. Adam pressing an ice pack under the loose waistband of his joggers while we let go of a dream in slow, gentle words. Vasectomy performed concurrent with repair. Follow-up analysis confirms azoospermia. When I'd read it the first time, I cried for everything that wouldn't be. Today I cried because it meant what Cassandra claimed could never have happened. The personal log felt invasive to open and necessary all the same. Adam's handwriting looped across the first page. Dates and short entries. Not a diary, a ledger. C. Made a suggestive comment while S. Took a call. Redirected, changed subject. Text from C. At 1:13 a.m. Wish you were here. Blocked number. Told S. Reading them gave me the oddest sensation. The room tilted, as if I was on a boat and the wake of our past had finally reached me. He'd chosen transparency when my own parents had urged, interpret it as friendly. He'd done what family should do. He'd believed me, protected me, stayed in the open with me. I left the letter for last. My name softened in his ink was enough to make my throat close. I slid a finger under the seal and unfolded the pages. My dearest S, it began. The air left me. He wrote about the ridiculousness of preparing for a disaster we couldn't name and the necessity of doing it anyway. He wrote about Cassandra with a compassionate clarity that didn't excuse her. He wrote about the surgery, how he hated that our choice might someday be used to hurt me, and how, if anything ever did, this file should put an end to it. And then he wrote what mattered most, what ached in the most human way. You are enough. You have always been enough. If I'm not there when you read this, let the facts defend you and let love heal you. Not theirs, ours. I pressed the letter to my chest the way someone might press gauze to a wound. Then I packed what I needed: certified copies of the will, the follow-up test, a selection of the log entries, and returned everything else to the box. Lock, click. Lid down. I left with evidence and an anchor. James Wilson's office looked like an old story about lawyers. A brownstone wainscoting, the scent of lemon oil and paper. He stood when I came in, a kindness so simple it nearly undid me. Sandra, he said, and used my name as if it could hold weight. Adam was a good man. He was, I said, and laid the forgery on his desk like something dead. Cassandra claims Adam had an affair with her 2 years ago. She says Lucas is his, and she waved this around at a birthday party like it was the 10 Commandments. James adjusted his glasses and skimmed the page, frowning at the first paragraph, grimacing by the second. This is sloppy, he said. Boilerplate language ripped from a template and mangled. The signature's trying to be Adam's, but the pen pressure's all wrong. The habit loop on his D is missing. He pulled out a red pencil and circled errors like a teacher grading an arrogant paper. No court would uphold this for a day. I don't want it to get to court, I said. I want it to stop. And it will, he said evenly. We'll do 2 things. First, we'll send a preservation letter to Cassandra. All communications regarding this supposed will must be retained. Second, we'll quietly engage an investigator. People don't commit felonies like this in a vacuum. There's usually a money fire somewhere, and they're throwing gas. Frank Delaney? I asked. The name sounded familiar from a Christmas party story. James nodded. The very one. Former detective. He has a nose for motive. He had more than a nose. He had a binder in my hands 3 days later that answered questions I hadn't let myself ask. Cassandra's debts ballooned across the pages. Credit cards, a personal loan, past due utilities. For months unpaid rent and a court notice taped to her door. In screenshots from group texts, the plan unspooled in her own words. Adam's death is tragic, but this is my chance. If I play it right, the house is my safety net. And the name of the friend who helped with the will was Dave. Not a lawyer but a freelancer who knew his way around design software, and had no idea about felony thresholds. And then the part that knifed and then cauterized. Tyler, the real father, had moved to Seattle and was dodging child support for a different child in New Hampshire. A bench warrant gathering dust with his name on it. Cassandra's desperation wasn't theatrical. It was arithmetic. She had built a life on borrowing and bluffing, and gravity had finally noticed. I carried the binder home and laid it on my dining table beside Adam's letter, as if the two could speak to each other in the quiet of our house. What do I do with this? I asked the empty room. Protect yourself, his letter had said. I could feel the old habit rising in me, the one my mother had fed since I was little. Smooth things over, make nice, keep the peace. Peace had always meant my silence. Not this time. I made one more call first, to Dr. Laurel Chun. She had sat with me through nights I didn't think I'd survive, guiding my grief into words when it threatened to drown me. If I confront Cassandra with this, I said, twisting a tissue into rope, I will be starting a war I can win. But there's a baby in the blast zone. There's always a baby in the blast zone when grown people refuse to grow up, she said gently. Sandra, listening to all of this, what I hear is not vengeance. I hear boundaries. You can be kind and still say no. You can help a child without handing your life to his mother. So I set a table not for dinner but for truth. 2 chairs facing each other, the recorder in between, a pitcher of water, and a folder arranged like a quiet ultimatum. When Cassandra arrived, she brought her reflection in my eyes, the girl I'd spent years trying to love into being better. She was wearing confidence like a coat she'd borrowed. It fit if you didn't look at the seams. I hope you don't mind if we record our conversation, I said, flipping the device on and speaking the date and time clearly. Given the legal nature of what you've done, I want us both to have an accurate record. She blinked, then pasted on a smile. Sure. No problem. Really, Sandra, this can be simple. The will is clear. Then tell me the story again, I said. Tell me how you and my husband began. She had a script. I could see her start it, the way her eyes went soft and wounded on cue. There were hotel rooms, she claimed, the Mandarin high floors, Thursdays when Adam worked late. He had confided his unhappiness, she said, in language ripped from a daytime drama. He said you didn't understand him anymore. I asked what he ordered from room service. She said steak and laughed like she remembered feeding each other fries. Adam didn't eat steak. A teenage bout of food poisoning had put him off it for life. I asked which side of any bed he preferred. She said left. He slept on the right, always, anchored by habit and the nightstand he'd built himself. Why does it matter? She snapped, finally, the edges showing. The point is Lucas is his, and the will. No, I said, and slid the medical folder toward her. The point is biology. 2 years before your son was conceived, Adam had a vasectomy. Here are the analyses. Here is the urologist's note. It is physically impossible for Adam to be Lucas's father. Color fled her face in patches, like a storm front breaking apart. She picked up the papers and read the words that closed the door completely. Anyone can fake doctor's notes, she said, but there was no conviction left. I placed the executed will on the table next, the seal shining like a coin. This is Adam's actual will, I said quietly. Properly drafted and witnessed. There is no mention of Lucas because there was no Lucas to mention. Because there was no affair. She looked small then. Not the villain I'd made her in my late-night arguments with the ceiling, just a woman whose shortcuts had run out of road. I laid the final folder down. The text with Jenna, the eviction notice, the debts, Tyler's bench warrant. I know everything, I said. And still, I invited you here instead of the police. Her shoulders collapsed. Sound came out of her like a cracked thing. I didn't know what else to do, she said. I was drowning. Rent. Medical bills. Tyler gone. I thought, she swallowed. I thought I could force you to give me what I needed. And what you needed, I said, was money. Yes, she said, so small I almost lost the word. And a way to stop feeling like the loser in my own family. The recorder hummed, tireless witness that it was. I turned it off. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to tell the truth to our parents. You're going to retract your claim publicly to every person you told, Jenna, the neighbors, the cousin you texted in Ohio. You're going to apologize to Adam's memory and to me. And then we're going to talk about how Lucas gets what he actually needs without you committing felonies. She stared at me as if I'd spoken a language she didn't understand. You're not calling the police? I could, I said. I have the evidence and the DA would take this seriously. But Lucas is not you. He is not your debts or your bad decisions. He is a baby who needs stability and medical care. So here's my offer. I will set up a trust for Lucas's health and education. I will help you secure stable housing. And you will agree in writing to therapy, to financial counseling, to steady employment, and to keeping Tyler out until he addresses his legal mess. If you violate any condition, the support stops and I walk all of this down to the courthouse. Her hand flew to her mouth. For a second I thought she might vomit. Then she nodded once, twice, like someone learning to breathe. I don't deserve this, she whispered. No, I said honestly. But Lucas does. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Inside, I felt something unclench. I wasn't naive enough to think a signature on paper could cauterize a childhood of competition and my parents' practiced blindness. But I had done what Adam asked in that letter without telling me to. I had protected myself with facts. I had set a boundary that still left room for a baby to thrive. I had chosen something harder than war. I had chosen terms. That night, after Cassandra left with the folder tucked under her arm like the first responsible thing she'd carried in months, I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets and read Adam's letter again. Let the facts defend you and let love heal you. Not theirs, ours. I traced the sentence with my fingertip. Love, I realized, is sometimes an affidavit and sometimes a lifeline. Sometimes it's both. The family dinner would come next. The truth said out loud where it had always been swallowed. My mother's reflex to defend Cassandra would flare. My father's discomfort would rearrange silverware. There would be tears and maybe the beginning of accountability. I was braced for it and I was ready. Before I went to bed, I stood in the doorway of the room that had been our guest room and now felt like a chapel. The watercolor of the Boston skyline hung above the dresser, the one Adam had won for me long before we knew the shape of our future. Or its absence. Orange bled into purple over a harbor that didn't care about our grief. I turned out the light and spoke into the soft dark, the way I sometimes did when I needed to imagine he could hear me. "I'm doing it the way you taught me," I said. "With receipts." The night before the family dinner, I barely slept. I lay awake in Adam's side of the bed, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing conversations in my head. Every time I thought I had it figured out, my chest clenched with dread. What if Cassandra backed out? What if my parents refused to hear the truth? What if they turned on me again for daring to pull back the curtain on the daughter they had always protected? Grief already had me raw, and this confrontation felt like a second funeral. Not of Adam this time, but of the family I had grown up believing I could count on. Still, I couldn't let fear silence me. Silence had always been Cassandra's playground. My parents' silence, my own silence. It was how she survived every mistake, how she avoided every consequence. This time, silence would not save her. When Saturday came, I set the dining table with trembling hands. Not with flowers or candles, but with something far heavier. The truth. The recorder sat in the middle like a quiet sentinel, and in front of each chair I placed water glasses, nothing else. This wasn't dinner. This was reckoning. My parents arrived early, my mother carrying a casserole dish like it was a shield. "I don't know what this is about," she said, her voice brisk, her eyes flickering nervously toward the recorder. "But Cassandra says you've insisted on some sort of meeting." "It's important," I said simply, "and it needs to happen all at once." My father didn't say anything, but he put the dish down on the counter and gave me a look, weary, guarded. He had always been quieter in our family drama, but his silence had weight. Sometimes I thought he agreed with me more than he let on. But his way of keeping peace was to avoid the war entirely. Tonight that wasn't an option. When Cassandra arrived, she was pale, dressed more plainly than usual. No new dress, no polished smile. Just exhaustion clinging to her like a second skin. She sat down across from me, not meeting my eyes. "Thank you for coming," I said, pressing the record button. "This conversation is being recorded, with everyone's consent, for clarity." My mother frowned but nodded. Cassandra shrugged. My father gave a small grunt of assent. "Cassandra," I said, my voice steady even though my pulse pounded. "Tell them." She shifted in her chair, eyes down. For once, she didn't try to make a performance of her tears. "I lied," she said flatly. "About Adam. About the affair. About Lucas being his son. None of it was true. Tyler is Lucas's father." The words landed heavy. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father blinked as if he hadn't heard correctly. "And the will?" I pressed. "I forged it," Cassandra admitted, her voice cracking on the last word. "I had a friend mock it up. I was desperate. Behind on rent, drowning in debt. I thought if I could claim part of the house, I could save myself and Lucas." My mother's gasp was sharp enough to cut the air. "Cassandra, how could you? How could you do such a thing? How could she?" I said bitterly, my voice rising despite myself. She stood in front of friends, neighbors, family, and accused Adam of betraying me. She tried to destroy his reputation, when he can't even defend himself, just to take what wasn't hers. My mother turned to me, eyes wet, pleading. "You're not going to press charges, are you? She's your sister, Sandra. And Lucas." I slammed my hand against the table. "I could press charges. Forgery. Fraud. Those aren't mistakes, they're crimes. Do you have any idea what this did to me? To Adam's memory? I buried my husband, and a week later I had to watch my own sister stand there and tell the world he cheated on me. And you're worried about her." The room went still. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother whispered, "She's family." "So am I." I shot back, my voice shaking with rage. "Your daughter. The one who has never asked you to bail her out of anything. The one who built her own life, her own business. The one who just lost her husband, and instead of defending me, you're already reaching to protect her." Again. Something in Cassandra broke then. She let out a sob, a real one this time. Not the crocodile tears I'd seen so many times before. She's right, she whispered. You've always made excuses for me. And I used it. I leaned on it. I thought you'd shield me forever. I thought Sandra would stay quiet like always. But I went too far. I see that now. My mother looked stricken. My father finally spoke, his voice low. Then what happens now? I inhaled, steadying myself. I'm not pressing charges. For one reason only, Lucas. He's innocent. He deserves stability, medical care, and a future. So here's what's going to happen. I laid out the agreement James Wilson had helped draft. I will set up a trust for Lucas, for his education and health expenses. Cassandra will enter therapy, attend financial counseling, and maintain stable employment. If she fails any of these conditions, the trust ends, and I will go to the police with everything. In return, Cassandra has already agreed to retract her lies, publicly. To everyone she told. My mother burst into tears. My father leaned back, exhaling slowly. Cassandra nodded, her shoulders slumped in defeat. It's more than I deserve, she admitted. Damn right it is, I whispered. The rest of the evening was quiet. My mother tried to smooth it over with food, but nobody touched the casserole. My father stared at the table as if it held answers he'd been avoiding for decades. Cassandra wiped her face with trembling hands. And me? For the first time in weeks, I felt something like clarity. Not peace yet, but clarity. When they left, my father hugged me tightly at the door. He whispered, Adam would be proud of you. My mother hugged me too, but her eyes were still sad, mourning not Adam, but the fantasy of the perfect family she had tried to maintain all these years. Cassandra lingered last, hand on the doorknob, eyes red. I really am sorry, she whispered. Not just for this. For everything. For always competing. For never being the sister you deserved. I looked at her for a long moment. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, I said honestly. But Lucas deserves better. And maybe someday we can find something new. Different. But not unless you change. She nodded. Then she left. I closed the door behind her and leaned against it, my body trembling. The house was quiet, but it felt different than before. Not empty this time, but strong. Adam's presence wasn't gone. It was in the files he left me, the foresight he'd shown, the love he'd wrapped around me like armor even in death. And for the first time since he died, I didn't feel defenseless. I felt prepared. The battle wasn't over, but the first strike had landed. Cassandra had confessed. The lies were out in the open. Now came the harder part. Living with the aftermath and making sure the boundaries I had drawn stayed in place. Because betrayal doesn't end when the lie is revealed. It lingers. It reshapes everything. And I had only just begun to learn what it meant to carry that weight, and survive it. The days after the family dinner felt like walking through the wreckage of a storm. The walls of my house were intact, but inside me, the landscape had changed forever. For the first time, Cassandra's lies weren't shadows I had to fight alone. They were laid bare, spoken aloud, impossible to deny. And still the air felt heavy with what came next. The confession was supposed to free me, but instead it unleashed a different kind of battle. My parents struggled to process what they had heard. My father grew quieter than usual, retreating into work in silence. My mother, however, reacted in the way I dreaded most. She tried to rewrite the narrative. The morning after the dinner, she called me. Your sister's fragile right now, she said, her voice sharp with a kind of forced composure. We don't need to keep dwelling on what she did. She admitted it. Isn't that enough? No, Mom, I replied firmly. It's not enough. She didn't just make a mistake. She created a forged will. She accused Adam of infidelity. She tried to rob me of my home. And she did it while I was burying my husband. That's not something we brush aside with a sigh and a casserole. My mother's voice wavered. But she's trying to change now. Shouldn't we give her the chance without holding it over her head? I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. I'm giving her a chance. That trust fund for Lucas? The housing arrangement I agreed to help her secure? The conditions for therapy and employment? That is me giving her a chance. But I will not let you or anyone else erase what she did. That's what allowed her to become this way in the first place. There was a long silence. Then finally my mother whispered, You've hardened Sandra. I felt my throat tighten. No, I said quietly. I've stopped being soft in places that keep getting cut. We ended the call in uneasy quiet, and I realized that my relationship with my mother might never return to what it once was. But perhaps that wasn't entirely bad. The illusion she clung to had been the soil where Cassandra's entitlement grew wild. Now the roots were exposed. Maybe, just maybe, something healthier could grow in their place. Still, the fallout spread wider than just our parents. Within days, the whispers began. Extended family called me with hesitant voices, asking if it was true. Old friends reached out with sympathy, some of them awkwardly apologizing for believing Cassandra's story at the party. Others avoided me altogether, their silence loud in my phone's emptiness. I decided early on that I would not defend myself with words alone. I didn't owe the world my explanations. Instead, I let Cassandra do it. At James Wilson's urging, she drafted a statement signed and notarized, admitting she had lied, forged documents, and slandered Adam's memory. Copies were sent to everyone she had told, including the neighbors, her friends, and our extended relatives. Reading it felt surreal, like staring at a mugshot of a person you once thought you knew. And yet, when the calls and texts trickled in afterward, something unexpected happened. People weren't just offering condolences anymore. They were offering respect. One of Adam's law partners called me personally. "He was proud of you, Sandra," he said. "And after all this, so am I. You've shown a strength I don't think even you knew you had." Those words landed in me like warm light. For weeks I had felt hollow, drained, and raw. To be seen, not just as Adam's widow but as someone holding her own, filled a part of me I thought was gone forever. But grief has a way of twisting victories into echoes of pain. I couldn't help imagining how Adam would have handled it. He would have been calm, rational, maybe even kind. He would have reminded me to protect myself but also to see the humanity in Cassandra, however buried it was. And that thought brought me to tears more than once. Because I had done exactly that. Not for Cassandra's sake, but for his. I found solace in small rituals. I visited the garden Adam had loved, trimming back the hedges he once teased me for neglecting. I polished the wooden banister we had spent a weekend sanding together. Each task felt like a conversation with him, a way to remember that our life had been built on more than Cassandra's betrayal. But as the weeks stretched on, another feeling began to stir in me: exhaustion. Not just from grief, but from carrying the weight of everyone else's reactions. The constant calls, the pitying looks, the awkward silences. I realized I needed something outside of family and memory to anchor me, something of my own. That's how I found myself at a grief support group in the basement of a small church downtown. 12 folding chairs arranged in a circle, coffee brewing in the corner. Strangers bound together not by blood but by loss. When it was my turn to speak, my voice trembled. "My name is Sandra," I began. "I lost my husband 3 months ago. And since then, I've lost a lot more than that. I lost my illusions about family. I lost trust in people I thought would always be on my side. But I'm here because I don't want to lose myself." The nods around the circle were slow and knowing. Each story I heard that night, of husbands, wives, children, parents, stitched me back into humanity. I wasn't alone in carrying the unbearable. And that realization, simple as it was, made the room feel lighter. Walking home that night, I thought about Cassandra again. About how loneliness had warped her. How envy had calcified into cruelty. And though I didn't forgive her, I began to understand one truth. People who destroy others often start by feeling destroyed themselves. That didn't excuse her. But it did explain her. And it made me more determined than ever not to let her cycle repeat in me. The next challenge came sooner than expected. A month after the dinner, I got a call from Cassandra herself. Her voice was shaky. "The landlord served me papers," she admitted. "We have to be out in 2 weeks." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Then it's time we put the housing plan into place," I said. "I'll help you find something stable. But remember our deal. Steady employment, therapy, and counseling. I won't lift a finger if you break those terms." She didn't argue this time. She just whispered, "Thank you." And for once I almost believed she meant it. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, Adam's letter folded neatly beside me, and realized something startling. Cassandra's crisis no longer consumed me. I wasn't acting from fear of her lies or desperation to fix her. I was acting from strength, my own and Adam's legacy. I smiled faintly, running my hand over the smooth paper. For the first time I thought, maybe I could survive this. Maybe someday I could even thrive. But I also knew one thing for certain. Cassandra wasn't done testing the boundaries. She never had been. And I would need to be ready, not just with Adam's foresight, but with my own resolve. Cassandra's eviction deadline came faster than either of us anticipated. Within 2 weeks, her landlord had taped another notice to the door. Bold red letters screaming the truth she could no longer outrun. By then she had no choice but to call me again. Her voice shook over the phone, not with her usual dramatics but with something closer to resignation. "I'm out of time, Sandra," she whispered. "Lucas and I will be homeless in days." I let the silence stretch long enough to remind her of the weight of her choices. "Then we do it my way," I said firmly. "No more half measures. We'll find you a stable place, but under the conditions we agreed on." And so we did. I spent 3 afternoons touring apartments with her, Lucas on her hip. She looked different this time, smaller somehow, her bravado stripped away. The Cassandra who once strutted into family dinners dripping with charm now shuffled beside me in worn shoes, exhaustion tugging at her face. She signed a lease on a modest 2-bedroom, subsidized through a local housing program I'd pulled strings to connect her with. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe. More importantly, it was hers, earned through accountability, not theft. I established the trust fund with James's guidance. Lucas's medical needs came first. His heart condition required frequent checkups, and the costs had been crushing Cassandra. With the trust, bills were paid directly, removing any chance for misuse. For education, we secured a 529 plan. A future written not in lies but in stability. Cassandra cried when she saw the paperwork. Not crocodile tears but real ones. "You're giving my son more than I ever could," she admitted. "And I don't deserve it." "You're right," I said quietly. "You don't. But Lucas does." I wish I could say that moment softened everything between us, but the truth is it didn't. The old wounds still lived between us like ghosts. I saw her progress, therapy sessions she attended faithfully, the new job she started as an office manager at a dental practice, but I couldn't erase the memory of her voice at Lucas's birthday party, announcing my husband's betrayal. Some things cut too deep to simply heal with time. Still, I became a steady presence in Lucas's life. I picked him up on weekends, took him to the children's museum, the park, even just long walks where he clutched my hand with tiny fingers and laughed at pigeons. He had Adam's spark, though not his blood. Maybe that was why I felt so fiercely protective of him. Not because of DNA, but because Adam would have wanted me to love him anyway. My parents' reactions to this new arrangement were complicated. My father kept his distance, though I saw him soften around Lucas, cradling him with surprising tenderness. My mother, however, clung to her guilt like a blanket. She doted on Cassandra, praising every small step as if desperate to prove she hadn't failed her younger daughter completely. With me, though, she tread lightly, wary of the steel in my voice when it came to boundaries. "You've changed, Sandra," she said one evening when she stopped by unexpectedly. "No," I answered evenly. "I've stopped allowing myself to be used." "That's not change. That's survival." She blinked, her lips parting as if to argue, then thought better of it. For once she had no defense. Months passed. Grief still haunted me. Sudden sharp reminders that Adam was gone. A song on the radio. His handwriting on an old grocery list. The empty chair at the dining table. But alongside grief something else grew, resilience. The support group became my sanctuary. Week after week we sat in that circle, sharing our burdens and victories, finding comfort in strangers who had become friends. It was there that I met Michael. He was a professor at Boston University teaching ethics, the irony not lost on me. Widowed too, he carried his own scars with quiet dignity. Our conversation started casually, just 2 people lingering over coffee after meetings. But soon, his presence became a steady light in my dim world. He listened without judgment, laughed softly at my dark humor, and never once tried to erase Adam from the room. We weren't in love. Not yet, maybe not for a long time, but we were something almost as important. Two people reminding each other that life could still hold meaning. But even as I rebuilt, the shadows of Cassandra's choices lingered. One afternoon, Frank Delaney, the investigator, called me unexpectedly. "I think you should know," he said, his Boston accent clipped. "Tyler's back in town." My stomach dropped. "Back? Here? Why?" "Hard to say. He's been seen around old haunts, hitting bars, talking big. But his record's still dirty, warrants unpaid support. He doesn't have legal ground, but if he figures out the trust fund exists." Frank let the implication hang. Panic fluttered in my chest. Not for me, but for Lucas. The boy had already endured enough instability. The last thing he needed was his father swooping in, smelling money, ready to exploit. That night, I sat with Cassandra at her kitchen table. A different table in her new apartment, with toys scattered around us and Lucas asleep in the next room. "Tyler's back," I told her. Her face drained of color. "God, no. He can't. He has no rights unless you let him," I said firmly. "And if he tries to come near Lucas, we'll shut him down. Legally, quickly, decisively." For once she didn't argue. She just nodded, fear trembling in her eyes. In that moment I realized something. Cassandra wasn't my greatest enemy anymore. She had already been disarmed, bound by the conditions we set. No, the greater threat now came from outside. From the man who had abandoned her and left Lucas fatherless in all but name. A man who might see my efforts not as protection, but as an opportunity. And as much as I wanted to believe my battles were behind me, I knew this was only the beginning of another storm. I didn't have to wait long for Tyler to resurface. It was a Thursday evening when my phone buzzed with a text from Cassandra. No greeting, just 2 words, "He's here." My heart stopped. I drove straight to her apartment, adrenaline pounding. The second I walked in, I heard raised voices from the living room. Cassandra stood with her arms wrapped protectively around Lucas, who was fussing against her shoulder. Across the room, Tyler leaned against the wall, his frame broad, tattoos spilling from his sleeves, a smirk twisting his mouth. He looked exactly like the kind of man who had never once considered the consequences of his actions. "Well, well," he drawled, eyeing me as if he had been expecting me. The golden sister herself. Rich, respectable, living in the fancy house. Taking care of my son now, huh? Lucas whimpered and Cassandra rocked him nervously. "You don't get to call him your son," she snapped. "You walked away." Tyler shrugged, but his eyes narrowed. "Yeah, I walked. But I still got rights. Blood rights. And I hear there's a nice fat trust fund now, set up in little Lucas's name. Funny how I never heard about that until recently." My blood ran cold. "Who told you?" I demanded. He smirked, tapping his temple. "I got friends. People talk. And I'm not stupid. If money's flowing, I'm entitled to some of it. I am his father." "You abandoned him," I shot back. "You left Cassandra drowning in debt, skipped child support, moved across the country with a new girlfriend. And now you think you can just walk back in and claim a piece of what doesn't belong to you." Tyler pushed off the wall, stepping closer. His voice dropped, low and threatening. "I don't think I know. Courts always side with fathers when money's involved. And you, sweet sister, you don't want any more family drama splashed around, do you? I mean, imagine what people would say if they knew you were hiding Adam's illegitimate son with hush money." Cassandra flinched, tears spilling down her face. "That's not true," she cried. But I didn't flinch. I looked Tyler straight in the eye, my voice like steel. "You really don't know what you're walking into, do you? Adam couldn't have been Lucas's father. He had a vasectomy years before Lucas was born. We have the medical records, notarized documents, and sworn testimony ready to prove it." Cassandra confessed to the lie. "So if you try to push that story, you'll only bury yourself deeper." For the first time, Tyler's confidence flickered. He shifted, jaw tightening. "That doesn't change the fact that I'm his biological father. Which means, I cut him off sharply. You owe him back child support, medical bills, stability. You want rights? Then start with responsibilities. You can't stroll back in after years of abandonment and expect to cash in like it's a lottery ticket." Cassandra sank onto the couch, clutching Lucas tighter. "I don't want you around him," she whispered. "You're not safe." Tyler's face hardened. "You don't get to decide that." "Oh, but we do," I said calmly, pulling a folder from my bag. I had prepared for this. Something in my gut had told me Tyler would surface eventually, and Adam's lessons had taught me never to face a threat without receipts. I laid the papers on the coffee table. His outstanding warrant for unpaid child support, his domestic violence charge from New Hampshire, his history of missed payments to Cassandra. You walk into a courtroom, I said, my voice sharp as glass, and all of this comes with us. No judge will hand you custody. No judge will give you access to funds that are locked in a trust with strict oversight. What you'll get, Tyler, is a cell. And a debt you'll never crawl out of. The smirk vanished from his face, replaced by something darker. He leaned closer to me, his breath acrid, his eyes narrowing into slits. You think you're smart, don't you? Hiding behind lawyers and papers. But you can't protect them forever. People slip. Doors get left unlocked. I refused to back down, though my stomach nodded. Leave Tyler. Now, if you want any chance at a future role in Lucas's life, it starts with you getting clean. Get a job. Pay your arrears. Go to court the right way. Until then, you're nothing more than a danger. And if you come near Cassandra or Lucas again without permission, I'll make sure the police escort you out in handcuffs. For a long, tense moment, he just glared at me. Then he laughed. A short, ugly sound. You've got fight in you, I'll give you that. Fine. Keep your precious papers. But this isn't over. He jerked his jacket on and stormed out, slamming the door so hard Lucas started crying. The silence he left behind was suffocating. Cassandra rocked Lucas back and forth, her tears falling into his soft hair. He's going to come back, she whispered. He always comes back. I sat beside her, my hands shaking though I forced my voice to steady. Then we'll be ready. This time he doesn't get to sneak in through lies or intimidation. We'll keep the evidence close. We'll put locks on every door. And if he dares to try again, we'll meet him with truth he can't outrun. That night I drove home through darkened streets, my mind racing. Tyler wasn't like Cassandra. Desperate but broken. He was something else. He was dangerous. And though I had disarmed him with facts tonight, I could feel it in my bones. He wasn't finished. When I got home, I opened Adam's letter again. My hands trembled as I traced the lines. Protect yourself. Use the facts. Don't let anyone take from you what is yours. His foresight had already saved me once. It would have to save me again. Because Tyler wasn't just a threat to Cassandra anymore. He was a threat to me, to Lucas, and to the fragile peace I was trying to rebuild. And I would not let him win. I didn't sleep the night after Tyler stormed out. Every creak of the house sounded like a threat. Every shadow stretching across the walls felt like him, lurking, waiting. I sat in the living room with Adam's letter on my lap, a reminder that preparation was my armor, that facts were sharper than fear. Still, fear hummed under my skin like static. The next morning I called James Wilson. He listened patiently as I relayed everything, Tyler barging into Cassandra's apartment, his veiled threats, the way he'd smirked at the mention of the trust fund. James sighed, his tone firm. He's testing boundaries, he said. Men like Tyler don't come back out of guilt. They come back because they smell money or control. We can't wait for his next move. We need to anticipate it. And how do we do that? I asked, rubbing my temples. By boxing him in legally before he tries to box you in emotionally. We'll file a protective order for Cassandra and Lucas. That buys time. Meanwhile, Frank can dig deeper. If Tyler's poking around, he's probably saying things to the wrong people. Frank was already on it. Within days, he had unearthed texts Tyler had sent to old drinking buddies. Got a kid with money in his name now. Easy meal ticket if I play it right. He had also been boasting at bars that he'd take back what Cassandra and I stole from him. Frank's voice was tight when he handed me the evidence. This guy's reckless. The kind who underestimates smart women and overestimates his own charm with a judge. But that arrogance? That's his weak spot. I clung to that thought like a rope in a storm. Still, Cassandra was unraveling. I found her one evening sitting in the dark, Lucas asleep in his crib, her hands trembling around a glass of wine. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't fight him. He's always been louder, meaner. He scares me, Sandra. He always has. I knelt beside her, my voice steady even though fear coiled in me too. Then let me fight him. You've made your share of mistakes, Cassandra, but this one isn't yours to carry alone. He left you. He abandoned Lucas. Now he's coming for what doesn't belong to him. And I won't let him. For the first time, she looked at me with something that wasn't rivalry or resentment. It was raw, unguarded trust. Why are you doing this? She asked softly. I swallowed hard. Because Lucas deserves better. Because Adam would want me to. And because if I let Tyler win, then Adam's protection, all the foresight he gave me, would mean nothing. The next week, Tyler made his move. A letter arrived from a lawyer with a name I didn't recognize, claiming Tyler was pursuing visitation rights and financial access as Lucas's father. Cassandra called me in tears, the paper shaking in her hand. He can't, she said desperately. He can't do this, right? He can try, I said grimly. But trying and winning are two very different things. James was ready. We filed a countermotion immediately, armed with evidence. Tyler's history of abandonment, his unpaid child support, his criminal record, the trust safeguards. And then the ace I knew he wouldn't see coming, Adam's medical records. The vasectomy. The proof that every one of Cassandra's original lies collapsed under science. When Tyler's lawyer demanded proof of paternity, James leaned across the polished oak table during the preliminary hearing and spoke with lethal calm. My client's late husband was medically incapable of fathering a child. We have notarized medical records and follow-up tests to prove it. Any attempt to suggest otherwise will be met with sanctions for frivolous claims. Tyler's face twisted, his arrogance faltering in real time. He hadn't expected me to come armed with receipts. He hadn't expected Cassandra to sit silently beside me, hands clasped tight, willing to testify against him if needed. For once he was the one on shaky ground. But the fight wasn't over. The judge set a formal hearing, and in the weeks leading up to it, Tyler grew bolder outside the courtroom. He showed up at Cassandra's apartment once, pounding on the door until neighbors threatened to call the police. He sent texts, ugly ones, dripping with veiled threats. Money or not, he's still my boy. Cassandra forwarded them all to me, her fear raw. And every time I added them to the growing folder of evidence, building a wall he couldn't climb. Yet the closer the hearing came, the more I felt Adam's absence like an open wound. At night, I sat in the quiet house we had built together, staring at the Boston skyline painting that had started it all. Adam had been the kind of man who believed in fairness, in systems working the way they were meant to. But I knew better now. Systems only worked if you fought for them tooth and nail. And that's what I was prepared to do. The morning of the hearing, I stood outside the courthouse in a tailored black dress, my hair pulled back, my spine straight. James adjusted his tie beside me. Cassandra hovered nervously, Lucas with a babysitter, her face pale. Tyler swaggered up the courthouse steps with his lawyer, still wearing that smirk, though it cracked at the edges. "Ready to lose, princess?" he muttered as he passed me. I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eye. "You have no idea what's coming." Inside, the gavel would fall, the arguments would be heard, and the truth, Adam's truth, my truth, would finally rise above Tyler's noise. I took a deep breath and followed James through the doors. This wasn't just about Cassandra anymore. This wasn't even just about Lucas. This was about proving that Adam's love and foresight hadn't been wasted, that even in death, he had protected me, and that I could carry that shield into every battle that followed. And this battle was only beginning. The courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and old wood polish, the kind of scent that makes you feel history pressing down on you. As we took our seats, the weight of silence wrapped around me like a shroud. This wasn't just another step in Cassandra's mess. It was the moment where everything Adam prepared for would either protect us or crumble under Tyler's noise. The judge entered, a stern woman with sharp eyes that flicked between us as though she could see every secret we carried. "We're here to hear the petition of Tyler Martin regarding custody and financial access to his son, Lucas Martin." Her voice was clipped, efficient. "Counsel, you may proceed." Tyler's lawyer rose first, slick in his expensive suit. He launched into a speech about parental rights, biological obligations, and Tyler's supposed desire to be a father now that he had turned his life around. He painted a picture of a man who had made mistakes but wanted redemption, who had been unfairly excluded from his child's life. I wanted to laugh. If redemption looked like bar fights and unpaid child support, then Tyler was a saint. When it was our turn, James Wilson stood slowly, his calm presence filling the room like gravity. He didn't waste words. Your Honor, what Mr. Martin is attempting here is not reunification. It is exploitation. My client, Mrs. Preston, has established a trust to provide for Lucas's medical needs and future education. This trust is not, and will never be, Mr. Martin's personal bank account. To grant him access would be to reward abandonment, negligence, and fraud. He handed the judge a thick folder, the same binder Frank had compiled. Inside you will find records of Mr. Martin's unpaid child support, his outstanding warrant for arrears owed to another child in New Hampshire, his criminal charges, and multiple instances of abandonment. Furthermore, James paused, letting the silence stretch, we have certified medical documentation confirming that Adam Preston, Cassandra's late brother-in-law, could not possibly have fathered Lucas. This eliminates any fraudulent claim to inheritance or estate rights that Mr. Martin might attempt to exploit. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly as she skimmed the documents. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his smirk wilting. But then, in true Tyler fashion, he tried to turn the tables. He stood abruptly, ignoring his lawyer's tug on his sleeve. This is all lies, he blustered. Fabricated to cut me out. I'm his father, blood don't lie. And you think a vasectomy means anything? Guys reverse those all the time. How do you know he didn't? The judge's gaze cut to him, unimpressed. Mr. Martin, you will sit down unless you are speaking through your attorney. But Tyler wasn't finished. He leaned forward, pointing at me with a sneer. And let's not pretend she's some innocent widow here. Maybe she wanted this set up all along. Maybe she likes playing savior, keeping control over everyone with her money and her fancy lawyers. The room went cold. For a moment his words echoed, twisting in the air. But then James leaned forward, his voice razor-sharp. Your Honor, Mr. Martin has just illustrated precisely why he cannot be trusted with custody or finances. He sees his son not as a child to be nurtured, but as a lever to attack others and a wallet to exploit. His outburst speaks louder than any evidence I could provide. The judge looked directly at Tyler. Mr. Martin, this court is not a place for tantrums. If you cannot compose yourself, I will hold you in contempt. His lawyer tugged him back into his seat, hissing something under his breath. Tyler muttered curses but sat down, fists clenched. James called Cassandra to the stand next. Her hands trembled as she swore in, but her voice, though soft, carried years of exhaustion. She recounted how Tyler abandoned her after Lucas's birth, how he sent almost no support, how she'd begged him for help during Lucas's surgery, and received nothing but excuses. She admitted her own mistakes too, her lies about Adam, the forged will, but emphasized how those came from desperation, not malice toward her child. The judge studied her carefully. And now, she asked. Cassandra straightened, surprising me. Now I'm in therapy. I have a steady job. I've agreed to conditions that protect Lucas's future. I won't deny I've been reckless. But I will never let Tyler jeopardize my son again. For the first time I believed her. Really believed her. Then it was my turn. My voice didn't tremble. I told the court how Adam had anticipated all of this, how he had left records, a real will, proof of his medical history. I explained why I had stepped in, not to control Cassandra, not to undermine Tyler, but to make sure Lucas didn't pay the price for the adults around him. He is a child with a heart condition, I said firmly. He needs stability, not chaos. He needs a future, not a father who views him as a payday. I am not his parent, but I am his aunt, and I will not stand by and let him be used. When I stepped down, I saw something in the judge's eyes I hadn't expected. Respect. After deliberating for what felt like hours, she returned with her decision. Custody remains with Ms. Cassandra Martin, under the conditions already set in place. Mr. Martin is denied access to the trust, and is ordered to pay back child support in arrears, enforceable by wage garnishment. Any visitation rights will be contingent upon proof of stable employment, clean living, and completion of a parental responsibility program. Until then, he is to have no unsupervised contact with the child. The gavel came down. Final. Cassandra burst into tears, relief and guilt colliding. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Tyler cursed under his breath, storming out of the courtroom with his lawyer scrambling after him. It was over. At least for now. But as I walked out of the courthouse, the spring air sharp in my lungs, I knew this wasn't just about a legal victory. It was something deeper. Adam's foresight had held. My resolve had held. Cassandra, against all odds, had chosen truth this time. And Lucas, sweet, innocent Lucas, had been protected. For the first time since Adam's death, I didn't just feel like I had survived. I felt like I had won. And I knew Adam would have been proud. The courthouse victory was decisive. But when I walked out that day into the crisp Boston air, I knew it wasn't an ending. If anything, it was the start of something harder. Living with the fallout. Winning in front of a judge was clean, sharp, final. Living with Cassandra, my parents, and the empty space Adam left behind, that was messy. That was where the real fight began. Cassandra moved through the weeks after the hearing with a kind of shell-shocked quiet. She showed up to therapy. She clocked in at her new job every morning. She signed every check-in paper for Lucas's trust like it was a contract with fate itself. She wasn't radiant or dramatic anymore. She was subdued, almost brittle. At first, I thought it was guilt weighing her down. But slowly, I realized it was something else. She was learning what responsibility felt like. And responsibility, unlike manipulation, didn't give her an audience. One afternoon, I went with her to Lucas's cardiology appointment. Sitting in the waiting room, surrounded by tired parents and pale children, she leaned toward me. "I don't know how you stood by me after everything," she whispered. "If the roles were reversed, I don't think I would have had the strength." I didn't sugarcoat it. "You're right. You wouldn't have. But that's why Adam prepared for this, and why I'm following through. Not for you. For Lucas." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. And for once she didn't argue. My parents, on the other hand, weren't as quick to evolve. My father avoided the topic whenever possible, preferring to ask me about my design clients or complain about the Red Sox bullpen. My mother, she lingered on guilt like a woman clutching an old sweater that didn't fit anymore. She called me often, her voice strained. "I just wish we could go back," she'd say. "Back before all this. Back when we were normal." "Mom," I told her one evening, standing at the sink with Adam's ring still cool on my finger, "we were never normal. You just didn't want to see it." Cassandra's behavior didn't start with Adam's death. It started years ago. And every time you looked away, it grew. She cried then, quietly. "Maybe I failed both of you." "No," I said softly, though my voice shook. "You failed her. You never let her face her consequences. And because of that, she thought she could take mine." For the first time, she didn't defend herself. She just whispered, "I'm sorry," before hanging up. It wasn't enough. But it was something. Meanwhile, my life, not Cassandra's mess, began to take on a shape again. The grief group remained my anchor. Each week I sat with 12 strangers turned friends, our chairs squeaking against linoleum, our stories spilling into the quiet. It was there that I learned grief doesn't shrink. It becomes part of you. But if you let others carry some of the weight, it stops crushing you. Michael, the ethics professor, became part of that weight sharing. We started with coffee, then dinners, then long walks through the public garden. He had the kind of calm presence that reminded me of Adam without feeling like a replacement. When I told him about the courtroom, about Tyler's threats, about Cassandra's confession, he didn't try to fix it. He just listened and said, "You carry yourself like someone who's been through fire. But you don't smell like smoke. That means you've survived without letting it consume you." It startled me how much I wanted to believe him. Work, too, offered a strange kind of healing. My design firm, which I'd nearly abandoned in the fog of Adam's death, began to grow again. Clients who had heard whispers of my personal life returned with sympathy and respect. One even said, "If you can handle family drama like that, renovating a townhouse should be a breeze." It made me laugh, really laugh, for the first time in months. But the biggest shift came when I launched the Adam Preston Foundation for Legal Education. I had taken a portion of his life insurance, added to it with my own savings, and created a scholarship for underprivileged students pursuing law. It wasn't just about honoring Adam's brilliance. It was about ensuring his values lived on. Integrity, preparation, justice. The night of the foundation's first fundraiser, I stood at the podium in a black dress Adam once said made my eyes look like storm clouds. The room was filled with lawyers, professors, students, and donors. My voice shook at first, but then it steadied. Adam believed in fairness. He believed in protecting people, not exploiting them. He believed in truth even when it hurt. This foundation exists because he lived those beliefs, and because I refused to let his legacy be defined by lies. Tonight, we plant seeds that will grow into lawyers who stand where he once stood, who fight the battles he no longer can. Applause thundered, and I felt something shift inside me. For the first time since his death, I wasn't just surviving Adam's absence. I was building something in his name. Still, shadows lingered. Tyler had gone quiet after the hearing, but silence isn't the same as defeat. Cassandra confessed once, late at night, that she still looked over her shoulder when walking home, afraid he'd show up again. Frank reassured us he was keeping tabs on Tyler, but I didn't let my guard down. Adam had taught me too well. Danger rarely disappears. It waits. Yet even with that lingering fear, I felt stronger. Adam's foresight had saved me, yes. But now, for the first time, I was saving myself. Protecting Cassandra. Protecting Lucas. Protecting the life I still had ahead of me. One evening, I stood in the garden Adam had loved, the daffodils he planted swaying in the spring breeze. I pressed my hand against the earth, the soil cool and alive. "I'm doing it, Adam," I whispered. "Not just surviving. Living. Building. Carrying you with me every step." The wind stirred the leaves as if answering, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. For months after the court hearing, Tyler vanished from sight. No late-night pounding on Cassandra's door, no drunken texts, no sudden appearances at bars where he used to brag. It was almost eerie, the quiet that followed his humiliation in front of the judge. Cassandra started to breathe easier. She'd walk Lucas to daycare without constantly checking behind her. She even laughed sometimes, a sound I hadn't realized I'd missed in her voice. But I didn't trust the silence. Men like Tyler didn't disappear. They simmered. They waited. And I was right. It was a rainy Thursday when Cassandra called me, her voice sharp with panic. "He's back. He showed up at daycare." My heart seized. "Is Lucas safe?" "Yes, the staff didn't let him take him. They called me." "He left before the police arrived." "But Sandra, he knew about the trust. He told the teacher I was hiding his son's inheritance from him." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. "Stay where you are. Lock the doors. I'm coming." When I arrived, Cassandra's hands were shaking as she clutched Lucas against her chest. He was confused but calm, patting her hair like he knew she needed comfort. I felt a surge of rage so strong it almost knocked me off my feet. Tyler wasn't just circling anymore. He had crossed a line. That night I called Frank. "Find him," I said, my voice cold. "I don't care how. I don't care what it costs. I want to know what he's planning before he makes his next move." Frank did better than that. Within a week he had photos, recordings, and witnesses. Tyler had been boasting again, only this time it was uglier. He wasn't just talking about money, he was talking about leverage. "All I gotta do is rattle her cage a little more," he told a friend at a bar. "That rich widow will pay to make me disappear. She's too high and mighty to let her precious reputation get dragged down." When Frank played me the recording, my stomach churned. It wasn't just about Cassandra anymore. It was me. He wanted to shake me down, using Lucas as a pawn. I met James in his office the next morning. His expression was grim. "This goes beyond custody now. He's trying to extort you. We can involve law enforcement." But something in me hardened. For months I had been reacting, responding to Cassandra's lies, Tyler's threats, my parents' blindness. I was done reacting. I was ready to act. "No," I said. "We're not just going to stop him. We're going to end this." So we set a trap. Frank arranged a meeting through one of Tyler's so-called friends, baiting him with the promise that I was willing to negotiate privately. We booked a hotel conference room under the guise of a settlement discussion. Cameras were hidden in the corners. A police officer sat in an adjacent room, ready to move the second Tyler incriminated himself. When I walked into that room, my heart was pounding but my face was steel. Tyler leaned back in his chair, grinning like he'd already won. "Finally," he drawled. "You came to your senses. So let's cut to it. You give me 200 grand from that trust, no questions asked, and I'll disappear." Leave you, Cassandra, and the kid alone. Easy. I sat across from him, calm, every word measured. $200,000 to abandon your son again. That's what you think he's worth. He shrugged. Don't pretend this is about him. It's about keeping your precious little world tidy. You don't want people whispering that your perfect husband had a bastard child with your sister. You'll pay to bury that, won't you? The rage rose hot in my throat, but I kept my tone icy. Adam could never have fathered Lucas. He had a vasectomy years before. I have the medical records, the notarized documents, the testimony of his doctor. You know what that makes your story, Tyler? Worthless. Just like your threats. For the first time his grin faltered. You're bluffing. Am I? I slid a folder across the table, the same evidence I'd carried for months. He flipped it open, scanning the pages, his face tightening with each line. You think this protects you? He spat. It already has, I said. And now it's going to bury you. Because this entire conversation has been recorded. Every word you just said. About taking money to abandon Lucas, about extorting me. It's all on tape. His eyes widened. He lunged across the table, but before he could reach me, the door swung open. 2 officers stormed in, pulling him back in handcuffs as he shouted and cursed. This isn't over, Sandra, he bellowed as they dragged him out. You think you've won, but you'll regret this. You'll regret all of this. But for the first time I knew he was wrong. It was over. Cassandra collapsed into a chair when I told her later, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered. You've saved us again. I shook my head. No. I protected Lucas. You'll save yourself if you keep doing the work. If you don't, no one can. She nodded, clutching Lucas tight. That night, I walked into the garden Adam had loved. The daffodils swayed in the evening wind, resilient, bright. I looked up at the sky, the stars scattered across the dark, and whispered, It's done, Adam. He can't hurt us anymore. Not her. Not Lucas. Not me. For the first time since Adam's death, I felt something I hadn't dared hope for, freedom. The morning after Tyler's arrest, the world seemed quiet. Not the fragile, waiting for the storm quiet that had haunted me for months, but a deeper, lasting stillness. The kind of quiet that comes after a war is won, after the battlefield is cleared, after the danger has finally passed. For Cassandra, though, the war wasn't over. Tyler's shadow lingered, and not just in the legal paperwork. I saw it in the way her hand trembled as she packed Lucas's lunch, in the haunted look she carried whenever a car slowed near the house. Trauma doesn't dissolve overnight. But for the first time she didn't try to run from it. One Sunday afternoon she came to my house. No makeup, hair pulled back, her usual defenses stripped away. She sat at the kitchen table, watching Lucas chase fireflies in the yard, his laughter spilling through the open window. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked like a fragile shell breaking. I was so blind, Sandra, she whispered. All those years I thought Tyler was my escape. I thought you were the enemy, so perfect, so untouchable. I hated you for it. But you were the one protecting me all along. I didn't speak right away. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her of every knife she'd twisted into my back, every betrayal she'd brushed off as my problem. But I looked at Lucas, his tiny hands reaching for light, and I remembered Adam's words. Family isn't about what you take. It's about what you protect. You don't have to apologize to me, I said softly. But you do have to show him, I nodded toward Lucas, that he can grow up trusting his mother. That means choosing better. Every day. Her eyes filled, but she nodded. I will. I promise. Over the next months I watched Cassandra change. Not in some dramatic overnight transformation, but in small, steady steps. She took parenting classes. She found a counselor who specialized in trauma recovery. She started volunteering at Lucas's daycare, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And slowly Lucas blossomed. He slept through the night without nightmares. He stopped clinging to my leg whenever Cassandra walked in. He laughed more big, bubbling laughter that made strangers turn their heads in the park. One evening he ran up to me with a crayon drawing 3 stick figures under a big yellow sun. That's you, Auntie Sandra, he explained proudly. That's Mommy. And that's me. I swallowed hard, my throat thick. It's beautiful, Lucas. Cassandra glanced at me, her eyes shining with gratitude. For once there was no jealousy, no resentment, just love. As for my parents, the road was harder. My father was quiet after Tyler's sentencing, subdued in a way I'd never seen. One night he called me. His voice rough, almost broken. "You were right about him. About all of it. I don't know how to make up for the things I didn't see, Sandra." I thought of all the years I'd carried their blind favoritism, the way they'd shielded Cassandra, excused her, ignored me. But now I also saw the cracks in him. A man realizing too late that he'd failed to protect the daughter who needed it most. "You can't make up for the past," I told him gently. "But you can do better in the time you have left." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. And me? I began to breathe again. I returned to the garden, planting more daffodils beside Adam's roses, weaving my grief into something living. I poured energy into my foundation, expanding scholarships for single mothers in Adam's honor. I traveled short trips at first, then longer ones, rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under fear and survival. One crisp autumn evening, I stood in the garden as the last rays of sun turned the flowers gold. Cassandra and Lucas came through the gate, carrying a basket of apples from the orchard. Lucas ran ahead, laughing, while Cassandra lingered by the roses. "He'd be proud of you," she said softly. I looked at her, surprised. "Adam," she explained, "for everything you've done for Lucas, for me. You didn't have to, but you did. That's love, Sandra. That's what family should be." For once I didn't argue. I just smiled, feeling the truth of it settle deep in my bones. Because in the end, this story wasn't about Tyler's threats or Cassandra's betrayal. It wasn't even about me proving myself to my parents. It was about Adam's legacy, what he left me, not in money or status but in strength. He had taught me how to fight, yes. But more importantly, he had taught me how to protect, how to love fiercely, how to build something lasting from the ashes of pain. And as Lucas's laughter echoed through the twilight, I knew that legacy would carry on. The first snow of winter arrived quietly, blanketing the world in white as if to say, "It's time to let the past rest." I stood in the garden, bundled in my coat, watching how the snow settled gently on Adam's roses and the daffodils I had planted beside them. Once this garden had been a place of grief. Now it was a place of remembrance and renewal. Behind me, laughter rang out. Lucas was building a lopsided snowman with Cassandra, his mittened hands working clumsily as she guided him. Their cheeks were flushed, their smiles genuine. It was a picture I never thought I'd see. My sister free of Tyler's shadow, her son safe, their bond healing. When Lucas called for me, "Auntie Sandra, come help," I felt my heart swell. I joined them, rolling a snowball bigger than Lucas himself, and for a while there was no past, no pain, just family. Later that evening, after Lucas was tucked in with a story and cocoa, Cassandra sat with me by the fire. The crackling flames cast warm light across her face, softening lines I hadn't noticed before. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "Not after everything." "You don't," I admitted, my voice steady. "But Lucas does. And sometimes life gives us second chances, not because we've earned them, but because someone else needs us to rise to them." She looked at me, tears in her eyes, and for once there was no argument, only gratitude. That night, after they left, I lingered in the quiet house. I pulled Adam's old journal from the shelf, the one he had filled with scribbles, sketches, and half-finished thoughts. On the very last page, I found something I had never noticed before. In his familiar, steady hand, he had written, "Strength isn't measured by what you survive, but by what you protect. If you're reading this, Sandra, remember, you are stronger than you know. And you'll never be alone, not while love carries you forward." I pressed the page to my chest, my tears falling freely, but they weren't bitter. They were healing. Because I finally understood. Adam's legacy wasn't about what had been taken from me. It was about what I chose to give. To Lucas. To Cassandra. To myself. In the years that followed, the garden flourished. Every spring more roses and daffodils bloomed, more life pushing through the soil. Lucas grew tall and confident, no longer haunted by fear. Cassandra became stronger, steadier. She never missed a single parent-teacher meeting, never let her son doubt her love again. And me? I found peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from carrying the past with grace. When people asked how I managed, I smiled and told them the truth. I chose to protect what mattered. And in the end, that made all the difference. As the snow fell gently outside my window that final winter's night, I knew one thing with certainty. Adam was still here. In the garden. In Lucas's laughter. In every choice I made to love, to protect, to rebuild. And I was no longer just surviving. I was living. In the end, this story wasn't just about betrayal or survival. It was about protecting what mattered most. Sandra learned that true strength isn't measured by what you endure, but by what you choose to protect. Her legacy, like Adam's, lived on in love, not loss. As the story closes, remember this. Sometimes the greatest revenge is building a life so strong that the past no longer holds power over you. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to Final Reckoning, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment with your own thoughts. Your story matters too.